Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos, and in homage to Oscar Hammerstein, I am both a gentleman and a dope. It's an interesting phenomenon, I think, that although the world is now a much smaller place, in the sense that we have so many more ways of communicating with each other, social media, including Twitter, Facebook, podcasts even, plus global news, so each of us now has a truly global reach in the information that we can find out about. So how odd it is, it seems to me, that there are still things which can sink without trace. One example is a musical which I've loved for years. It's called Iron Curtain. I saw it at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in 2007, and I've loved it ever since. Yet can I find anything about it online? Barely the faintest whisper. It seems to have totally disappeared, which seems impossible in this day and age. But the reverse can also be true. What if there was a show which had reached Broadway, had been connected with some truly big names like Tyne Daly or David Hyde Pierce, Chip Zien, and yet was unheard of in Britain only 2 years later? How is it that something important, popular, and actually very, very good should seem to rise without trace? Because that's what it did. It reached last year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and almost everyone I know who went to see it loved it, and yet at the same time knew nothing about it in advance. What's the name of the show, I hear you ask? I've got very acute hearing. Well, it's called It Shoulda Been You. And I pronounce it that particular way because the second word is shoulda, C-H-O-U-L-D-A. So I do knock a mark off for bad spelling. But conversely, I then put it back on again because the show is awfully good. And it's about It Shoulda Been You that we're going to be spending most of our time in today's episode. Well, what do we know about it? Well, if you're like me last year, practically nothing. However, if you're a regular listener to Musical Talk, you may remember a few weeks ago a short conversation about It Shoulda Been You with Michael Gordon Shapiro, the noted American writer of musical theatre. He and I both loved it, although we weren't blind to its unusual structure. Well, just to give you a few more details before we get into the meat of today's conversation, It Shoulda Been You was originally produced off-Broadway in 2011. In fact, so off-Broadway, it was New Jersey. Its book and lyrics are by Brian Hargrove, and its music is by Barbara Anselmi. And after that initial run in 2011, it was changed and eventually made it to Broadway proper, where it ran between March and August 2015. Directed by no less than David Hyde Pierce, who you'll know from television as Niles Crane, or you'll know from musical theatre as the detective in Curtains. It starred Tyne Daly, Sierra Boggess, Edward Hibbert, Chip Zien, and a whole bunch of other very famous people connected with musical theatre. It seemed to have quite a stellar cast, making it all the stranger that we really haven't heard of it. Well, it finally came over to Britain in 2017, where I saw it as part of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And so delighted was I by the show that I sat down with its director, Neil Lavin. And that's what we're going to be hearing now. So I hope that this conversation is both enjoyable and informative about a show which really ought to be much better known. Musical Talk.
I'm Neil Lavin, and I'm the director of It Shoulda Been You.
Now, there's several things here. You're the director, which means you are God. But the show, it's a highly accomplished show. I believe it's a fairly new American piece from something like 2015.
Yeah.
I must say it's not yet widely known.
Yeah, it's strange.
How did you and your colleagues come to be doing It Shoulda Been You? And I have to say, it is shoulda, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So I was actually on Broadway in the summer of 2015.
Well done, you.
Just seeing some shows, and It Shoulda Been You was on. It wasn't until much later, literally a couple of months ago when we were doing the show, I realised I was there when it was on. That's sort of how unknown it was.
Oh, you hadn't actually made the connection?
No.
Oh, right, how
I
wonderful.
knew it was on about that time, but I
Yeah.
didn't realise I was actually in New York when it was running.
Oh, I see. So you didn't actually get to see it when it's originally
No.
What a great pity.
I knew nothing of it
Yeah.
when I was there, which is really bizarre, given the sort of calibre of the actors they had. But yeah, we were pursuing a couple of other options, and then we watched the Tony performance of Lisa Howard singing Jenny's Blues, sort of the big 11 o'clock number, and we were like, oh, that's ideal, but the rights weren't out. So sort of probably about a year went by, we'd sort of looked at it as an option, and then life got in the way. And then
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And then the rights came out. I don't even think we got an email. I think we were just sort of stalking the rights holders page meticulously every day to see what was available.
And then bing, it happened.
Yeah. And we were like, right, this is it. We have to do it, because it is the sort of perfect Fringe show in our eyes. It's ensemble cast, 95 minutes, sort of laugh a minute.
It's a beautiful piece,
Yeah.
and it was beautifully performed. So I think there are two avenues to pursue here, which is to talk about the piece and also to talk about the group that you are and how you came to do it. So this must be one of the first productions outside of Broadway if the rights have only just been released.
Yeah,
so that's quite trepidatious for you.
There's
isn't
been
it?
a few regional productions in America and one in Australia, but we're sort of the unofficial European premiere. As we're amateur, the rights holders won't allow us to say that we're the European premiere, but we are
the first people
the
to do
first
it.
production in
Yes.
Europe.
Well, people can write that down and look at that at their leisure and make of it what they will.
Exactly.
People shouldn't be worried, by the way, because I have to say it was a phenomenal production.
Oh, thank you.
Beautifully done. And actually, I was sitting with a good friend of mine who's an American man, an American writer at that, actually, writer of shows. But when at the very end of the show, the woman playing Jenny then speaks to the audience in her real voice, and she's Scots, isn't she?
Yeah.
He actually said out loud, "Oh my God!" He could not believe it. He thought the cast were an American cast, as indeed did I. Although obviously I'm not American, so my ear isn't quite as attuned. His is. So you can feed that back. Your cast are absolutely pitch perfect on the American accents.
That's great.
He simply couldn't believe it. And as we walked away afterwards discussing it positively, that was one of the things that came up quite a lot. But let's talk about the show, because obviously you're the director. And what a difficult job that is, in the sense that you're there, I think, to navigate this piece, particularly if it's an unknown piece. So it's not even a well-trodden path. You're here to navigate it for interpretation to your cast and orchestra. A lovely size orchestra, by the way, and then therefore for the audience. You are our eyes so that we can interpret. That's a big ask for a show that you're not overly familiar with and that no one else is familiar with at all. I mean, I simply hadn't heard of it. My American friend, who's in the biz, had not heard of it.
Yeah.
So it hasn't yet got the profile. It's beautifully written. Everything about it is lovely. But how did you do it? So, what went through your mind when it landed on your lap in script form?
I'm not even really sure where to begin, to be honest. I think because it has such a clear, I sort of refer to it as the cast, with the cast, as sort of being a train ride. And at the start, at 8:15, we get on it, and it just carries us through to the final bow at 10 to 10 at night.
It has its own built-in momentum.
Yeah, it's a very well-paced piece. The sort of songs come at the perfect times. So beyond that, we got very lucky when we assembled our cast in that everyone is so perfectly suited to their role. And we auditioned in May, I want to say, April, May time, and then we did a read-through in June, and then that was it until 4 weeks ago now, when we started 3 weeks of intensive rehearsals.
Yes, it would have to have been intensive because it moved smoothly. There was no missteps in terms of performance at all. So, the very fact you've just told me you're not a professional group quite surprises me.
Yeah, so pretty much all the cast, I'd say 99% of them are students. Our leading lady, she studies physics at the University of Glasgow. We've got lawyers, we've got accountants.
So not naturally musical theatre people,
no.
Although obviously anyone can do it.
Yeah, I believe three of them are studying musical theatre, drama-related things, but beyond that, it's illustrators, it's medics, it's all sorts.
Well, very good all sorts, if I may say.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't quite realise until 3 weeks ago how lucky we'd got in terms of the cast, in that everyone had done so much homework and they knew their character inside out. So really I just came in and had to say, stand here, move here, do this. And beyond that, we just kind of threw it down on the ground. And I said to them a lot, it's all about the relationships between these 13 characters. So all I really did initially was throw down some rough blocking, tell them, oh, you walk in from this store, you're going to cross over here on this line. And then we just ran it and let them find their own natural rhythm.
So you're an actor-director in that sense? You're
sort
happy
of, yeah.
So you're not just logistically, you're happy for them to explore and...
Definitely.
Not jodhpurs in a megaphone then.
Yeah. But yeah, it was nice seeing them find their own rhythm to the piece, and then obviously going back in and saying, oh, let's add a little pause here, let's speed this up.
I think now will be a very good time just to briefly describe what the piece is about in terms of its plot. I mean, it's easy to say it's about a wedding in America, but there's a little bit more to it than that. So do you want to have a crack at that?
So do we want spoilers?
No.
Okay.
Let's be... The way I shall briefly explain, but there's structurally, it seems to me that about 2/3 of the way in, there is the big plot twist, which then drives the last act. I suppose you could argue it's 2 acts in that sense, if we take that as the cut-off point, without revealing what that massive twist is, because it's such a big driver and it would be a shame to destroy it. I think it's still perfectly reasonable to give us the setup and how it's moving itself forward. So
from the offset, it's established that we've got Jenny, who is our leading lady, despite she's not the bride or the groom, she's actually the co-maid of honour.
And she's the bride's sister, isn't
she? Yes. Her older sister, and also the bigger of the 2 sisters, as is addressed straight away in the script. It's a very specifically written role, one that our actress Marna Yule plays so perfectly.
She is born for that role, if I may say. Emotionally, exactly pitch perfect.
Oh yeah. It's every beat. It's beautiful to watch every night. So the bride's family, the Steinbergs, are a Jewish family, and the bride, Rebecca, is marrying Brian, who is a Catholic boy, I guess you could say, and his mum and dad are not big fans of the Steinbergs, and likewise with the Steinbergs not enjoying the Howards too much.
Family antagonisms.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, not actually based on their religious differences, although that's an added mix and a sort of spice to the flavour. It is actually because they're very different kinds of people. Yeah,
you've both got the Steinbergs, who are very stereotypical sitcom American Jewish family.
Yes, big Jewish mother in the sense of by which I mean full of neuroses. And gentle, perhaps henpecked husband who may stand up on those occasions when he absolutely has to, but won't otherwise. That's Murray, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Murray's very much outnumbered in the family. He's got 3 girls, and he's just fighting his own corner. And then, by contrast, we have the Howards, who are very, very conservative, very well-off family. Brian's a single child, as far as the script sort of lets on. So he's very, very much in the bubble of his family, and his mum not wanting to let him go, and there's conflict there.
Yes, they're straight-laced, and I know class isn't quite the same thing in America, but one feels that they are they see it that their son is marrying down.
Yeah, that's very much implied. And then beyond the 2 families, we have our wedding planner, and his
fantastic.
2. Yeah, Max is great.
What a great role, though. Just walk in, a few comments, a look to the audience. I mean, he's once again pitch perfect again. The cast is so good.
Yeah, they're incredibly talented. We're so lucky. And we have his 2 assistants, who also play throughout the show the embarrassing Steinberg relatives, let's say, who just pop up here and there for the odd scene, and again, they're great fun.
As you would get at a wedding.
Exactly.
There's a kind of heightened comic realism to this, isn't
yeah.
You can sort of imagine that it might well have happened. Just with a few more laughs, a few more songs, and a bit more emotion, shall we say.
And then additionally, we have the bride's ex-boyfriend, who makes an appearance, shows up to try and ruin the day. But not really for the reasons that we first expect.
Yes, that's a beautiful twist as well. There's several. I'm interrupting here, but there's a couple of things where the rugs are pulled from under you. That's one of them, I think. I think it looks like the standard story, which we've all seen 1,000 times. A slightly awkward match. Will it be stopped at the last minute by the true love who comes back from the past? And funnily enough, I was discussing with my colleague, who's called Mike Shapiro, who's a writer in his own right. He and I were talking about how we've seen that trope 1,000 times and how nice it was to have that not be the case.
Yeah.
But there's a 1930s British book which has been turned into a film called Nice Weather for the Wedding, which almost exemplifies that story. That is about it's not about a mismatched marriage, but it's about a woman who's getting married to the second best, and then her real love turns up and does try to win her back.
Yeah.
It's so we all know that trope.
Yeah.
From Hollywood and books and films, both in
Definitely.
British culture and American culture and everywhere else, I imagine.
It's been really fun directing that because there's so much to split into 2 acts, even though it is a 1-act play. The first act, there's so much going on that the audience are so oblivious to until their second watch, and they know the twist and they make sense of these little throwaway lines here and there. So I've referred to
a proper Matrix, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I've referred to it a couple of times as sort of Hansel and Gretel directing, in that we're sort of laying the trail of breadcrumbs throughout the show in such a way that it's not obvious, but then when you watch it the second time, the same thread goes straight throughout.
So you can see all
So it feels like a tangent the first time you watch it, but then the second time you see it, you can see, oh no, it's just a straight line, and all of this makes sense with that.
So it's show you're working, but then hide it.
Yeah, it's been really confusing actually. There's sort of times we've had real crisis in rehearsals trying to figure out how much someone might react to something that's happening, because obviously the character knows more than the audience do, but if they react too much, then the audience will get why.
Too much. Yes, quite. Yeah, you don't want to mug the delicacies of the plot.
Exactly.
Yes, quite.
But I have to say that often applies to our bride and groom, Sean Tanney and Elaine Fraser, and both of them sort of carry that the twist, let's say, so well.
Oh yes.
And they play it so well, and then, like I say, it's totally believable
surprise.
Once you know it, but it's also a total shock when you don't, which is.
You just don't see it coming.
No.
But as you say, it's not a handbrake turn in terms of character.
No.
It's all of a piece. It's just not in plain view. It's not even in disguise view, really. It's subtly pinpointed, which you can only see later on, as you say. Yeah, there's a lot of lovely bits in it structurally. Let's go back to some of the rug pulling then.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, the first act is a whole bundle of what goes on at a wedding, and the arguments within families and arguments between families, and nerves and neurosis and organisation, because let's remember it's an event. So you get all of that. So it's this lovely kind of it's a rich stew of human comedy, actually, character comedy. It's good observational stuff. Anyone who's been to a wedding, whether you may not have been to an American wedding, but you get the idea, because although wedding cultures and traditions are very different, there's also a great deal of overlap.
Oh yeah, a wedding's a wedding at the end of the day.
It is. And then once you get beyond the twist, then the second act is about resolving that plot, if you like. But there's some interesting stuff going on. Like Jenny is the central character, as you quite rightly say. But there are several things about the narrative I think are unusual. First of all, Jenny is the central character. She is the sister of the bride. And it is her journey which overall, in an arching sense, that we're seeing. And yet, she does some things which you don't often see in a musical. Her very first number, in fact the first number of the piece, is not an I want song, it's an I don't want song. And if you know your Sondheim, it owes a very great deal, I don't mean borrows, but it gives the feeling and has resonances with Getting Married and Not Getting Married Today from Company, which is all about someone who doesn't want to get married, although ultimately does. In this, at the end of the song, she says, I never wanted to get married, so I didn't, and I haven't. Basically she's saying, I do not want to do this. So she's laid down a negative manifesto, which is first of all quite an unusual thing to see in a musical. And then there's this, I must say, it's interesting that it's an ensemble piece, and therefore Jenny's character is not centre stage. She is part of the ensemble. She's not always on stage. There's an awful lot of other plot strands. I mean, how many characters did you say? 13?
13.
13 is a big number of delineated characters for an audience to get their heads around. But of course, the melee of a wedding would allow you to do that, because it's like a funeral. Every family member is going to be there, just a bit jollier. More colourful clothing on the whole. But, so, that sense it works really well, and the characters are so beautifully delineated, you do see them. But she, therefore, disappears a little bit into the throng of people. She comes out every now and then to have nexus points for her character, but so do other characters, so it's difficult to see. It's like she's the lead character in disguise in terms of the plot. And then, as I say, it does ultimately resolve itself in a way that you can see that she was the central character, and that's fine. There's another structural thing I'd like to talk about in a minute now, but actually let's talk about that. As a director then, how do you've been nodding all the way, I've been making that very long-winded description of it, but how far did you want to hide the fact it's that story? How far did you want to enhance it, and how far does the book itself equivocate in either direction?
My sort of personal view, I don't know if this is because, give myself a slap on the wrist, watch the bootleg, or things like that. But I've always sort of viewed it as Jenny's story in a way, and everything's sort of happening around her. But then again, I don't know how much of that's because I've seen it and then seen it again. I think probably on my first view...
You're a few steps in already, aren't you, in terms of immersion? So.
Yeah. So I think on my first sort of viewing and reading and things of it, I probably was, like you say, sort of surprised that it was Jenny's story. I mean, in itself, if you look at the Broadway cast, you've got Sierra Boggess and David Burtka playing the bride and groom. So it's assumable that they're going to be the leads.
Yeah, they're the names.
But actually... Sierra Boggess, for example, she's the third, perhaps the fourth female lead after her sister and the two mothers.
Yes.
So I think it was very intentional the way they did it as well, to sort of big it up with this big name, and then, it's not actually really about her. But in terms of
hiding in plain sight, though, isn't it? Because
exactly.
As you say, the thing looks like it is the wedding of the bride and groom.
Yeah.
It's a wedding. And so they're always, it's their day. If it was a real wedding, i.e. not on stage, it would certainly be their day.
Oh, yeah.
So I suppose in that sense, you have to put the right character, the names or whatever, or put the emphasis there, because that is it. And also, it is plot relevant.
Yeah. But beyond that, sort of looking at it as our piece, I was very supportive of the ideology of it being Jenny's story, partially because Marnie and I have discussed this before, Marnie the girl who plays Jenny. It's very unique in the sense that it is ultimately a romantic storyline in which we have a plus-size female lead, and even in 2017, in I'd say sort of movies and TV, it's getting there, but theatre is very much dragging its heels. You've got Hairspray, but I mean Tracy Turnblad's a cartoon at best, a very caricature, chubby girl.
And they're generally used. I mean, obviously, I appreciate it's often a man playing the mother character, but it's a fat suit. It's not actually a fat actor or actress, is it?
Whereas with this, it explores body image in a way that I can't say I've seen in a musical theatre form before.
And that is where so much of the sensitivity comes from. There's a song called I'm Beautiful.
Yes, Just Beautiful.
Just Beautiful. And that is... It is a genuinely plaintive song. And it's a lovely song and should be much better known. And of course it also has a rather marvellous plot. When I say payoff, there is a connection to it in the dialogue later on which makes perfect sense.
A sort of
sub-reprise to something that happens later, That's a beautiful song, and I agree with you. So much of what it does well, it does cryptically almost. Yep. It's certainly not a show that thematically punches you on the face. It thematically reveals itself to you, which is a very different, much more enigmatic in that sense. And yet, it does it so naturalistically within the confines of a heightened musical version of a wedding, which is already a heightened environment, that everything feels absolutely right, if that makes sense. Yes, it's there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this, as there has to be for the plot.
Definitely. And it's very sort of... It's a very sneak attack on the audience.
A sneak attack, I very much like that phrase.
Everything sort of just... It creeps up on you in ways that we're sort of laying the groundwork early on for all of the twists that are about to happen. And like I say, when you go back, you can see, this is where this started. This little look between these characters. That kiss or whatever.
Suddenly meaningful. When in fact they were just relatively random, or the kind of thing that happens and you don't spot.
So like I say, it was all about sort of laying those breadcrumbs to create the trail that you're then going to follow and then follow again if you see it a second time. And Jenny's storyline is very much one of those. And as I briefly touched on, the sort of size issues that it brings up, where
it has worth and meaning, doesn't it?
And I mean, there's more sort of values to the story, which again are spoilers, so I won't go into them. But body image is sort of at the forefront along with the other themes, and it was nice to be able to tell such a unique story and to approach it in a way that people won't have seen before, because it's not been written before, so it's not been done amateurly before, so it's not been done in Edinburgh before, so
the big reveals and the themes, I mean, nothing about it is known.
Exactly.
Which is very much to your advantage, because with speech marks, and I'm using shorthand here, an enigmatic piece, and it's not enigmatic at all, it's just clever, but it doesn't lay its stall out directly.
It doesn't.
But that's lovely.
Yeah, nothing's upfront about it. Everything, say in, as we say, Act 1, everything in Act 1 has another meaning, basically. Every line. And there's lines that I'm realising, we're 6 shows into the run now, and I was like, oh, that little conversation with Jenny and her father, that's what he's talking about. And literally every line, basically, refers to something that will happen later on.
So if you plotted it all out on a piece of paper, it'd be quite a complex graph, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't want that job.
Yeah. So let's talk then about the score, if I may. Mm-hmm. It is a musical. It has every right to be a musical. You can see why it's been musicalised. Heightened emotions, hidden emotions, all manner of bits and pieces that musical theatre does so much better, or so well, should we say, than perhaps other genre. But it seems to me that musically it has 3 kind of different tones broadly. Mm-hmm. There's the Sondheimian feeling. There's at least 2 or 3 songs which certainly feel Sondheimian. Mm-hmm. I assume that's the right term. The very opening number, as we said, has these resonances with Not Getting Married Today. There's I kept getting feelings from Into the Woods. There's sort of the sequence with the blame song and some harsh truths, sort of. There's elements of that, and actually some of the sound of it is quite Sondheimian as well. It's not they are not borrows, but it's from the school of Sondheim in some senses. Definitely. Then there are some songs which are contemporary Broadway feeling, and we all know them. It's very much you can tell it's from the last few years, I think, in terms of its contemporary feel. And then every now and then it gives you a kind of sort of 1920s, 30s number. Quite often, I think, for the parents. So I think it's doing a generational thing musically. Which I think is quite clever, actually, I must say. But you've got these 3 different things. It seems and feels like a cohesive score, but it's obviously tripartite, if you like. It's was that something that you as a group picked up? Is it something that you've had to, are you just happy to let it be and have the confidence in the score that it works, or are there, how have you addressed that interesting, very effective but slightly 3-parted score?
I think it's sort of well out with my remit as director. That's
it's your musical director.
Yeah, our fabulous director, Stephen Seago. He is extraordinary and taught the cast all their vocals before we began rehearsals. But sort of my take on it and the way I approached the staging was to sort of have, like you say, there's sort of 3. We've got the Sondheimie, we've got the contemporary, we've got the old-timey parent songs. And I sort of tried to reflect that in the staging of those numbers and make sense of it through the characters. Because like you say, we have the song Nice, which takes place in the hair salon between the 2 mums. That's very Last Midnight, Into the Woods. And to me, that made sense because that's probably what Judy's voice would sound like. Whereas Jenny has this big belty number, Jenny's Blues, in the sort of latter half of the show. And that makes sense. That's how Jenny would sing at that moment. Whereas earlier in the show, she has the Sondheim number, while she's very much under the oppression of her mother.
Yes,
and then
there's neurosis by relationship, isn't there?
Exactly.
The mother is absolutely a neurotic mother.
Exactly.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. No other way that could be played, I think. Certainly from the script. And she does rather put her daughter down. Not maliciously, it's just that, she can never be right. She's never quite good enough. And you feel for Jenny as a character all the way through because of that. And you can see that she's been ground down to a degree. She's very resilient, which is actually her great strength. But even the most resilient will have the erosion of day-to-day grind upon them. So you're right. Neurosis can breed further neurosis. And so you're right. And, a tight Sondheimian lyric is going to give you a sense of musical neurosis. And as you say, then as she sort of frees herself up, as it were, she becomes the belt comes out. As the constraints fall off, actually, I suppose.
No, definitely, and it's great to let Marnie just go pedal to the metal with her voice, because she's such a powerhouse vocalist, in addition to being such a nuanced actor.
Well, it's the subtlety of her performance, which I think also contrasts so beautifully with that.
Exactly. You can't have the belting and not have the heart of the character to support it. Otherwise,
Oh, yeah.
You're just battling for no reason.
Well, you don't want a foghorn, and she's not a foghorn.
Exactly.
You know, she's a Campbelto, but she's not, as I used to say, a little merman, but with a bit more heart, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or a lot more heart. So that's interesting that, you know, that you have spotted that musical difference and that you've accommodated it in choreography and movement, which is very important. Culturally, the show is a very American wedding.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to tell you, as I said to my friend Mike, I have no idea what a panini station is. I've never heard of it. I don't know what it is. Even now, I need to, forgive me, when Edinburgh is over, the first thing on my list of things to research is what the hell is a panini station? I assume it's a bar with some sandwiches on it. But
Yeah,
I mean,
so it's just sort of...
it's used for comic effect. Should it be cancelled? Should it not be cancelled? What would the neighbours think? Did other people have it?
Yeah.
So it's being used in that kind of... Everything must be perfect, but also unique kind of stuff that you hear, particularly neurotic mothers worry about weddings. But it's a MacGuffin. I have no idea what it is.
Oh, yeah. One thing that surprised me, actually, is how many laughs the panini station gets. But like you say, it is just a vehicle for the will we, won't we. But, you know, there's a lot of American references, there's a lot of Yiddish. And I'd be lying if I said I wanted to keep it. If I had my way, I probably would have just cut it, because there's a lot of, the Catholic grooms trying to learn Yiddish to impress the bride's parents.
Does it really badly. But we can't get that he's doing it badly because most of us don't have it.
It's like a sort of double meaning that we don't know the first meaning, so we miss. And it's very American.
You have to rely on reaction shots to understand what's going on. So, you know, an eye rolling by Murray or something will let us know that it's been really badly delivered.
Exactly. But I imagine those sort of lines are much funnier with an American audience.
Just immediately understandable, aren't they? Whereas they're one step away. Yeah. So it is culturally very American, and yet it succeeds absolutely. Even when some of the detail is something we're going to have to take as read because we just don't know it. Yeah, there are several other things. I mean, this is just my cultural ignorance, I'm afraid to say. I know it, but because I haven't experienced it significantly enough for me to remember it. The wedding itself takes place behind a curtain, so we don't see it. We don't see the ceremony, which actually, bearing in mind how dull weddings actually are at that moment, that's a real blessing, if I may. So my hat's off to everybody on that. But there's the sound of a glass being smashed.
Yeah.
And I think most British audiences would, in the first instance, think that's a moment of neurosis, that someone, or an accident, someone's either accidentally dropped a glass, or it's the sign of someone's had a meltdown and the glass has fallen. And it's only a second later when they all shout Mazel Tov. Yeah. But you suddenly think, oh no, that's what happens in a Jewish wedding. Yeah. But it's just not so culturally resonant in this country. Yeah,
I think that's another one where I'm quite enjoying that, as you say, the glass breaks and you can feel the audience go like, oh God,
what's happened?
Yeah. And then there's the Mazel Tov.
Oh no, it's supposed to happen.
Yeah, I quite enjoy that little moment.
Which you wouldn't get in an American audience, would you? That's a purely British response.
Exactly. And like you say, it's very strange that the wedding takes place off stage. And I've got a lot of friends who've come to see it, and we told them, it's about a wedding, everything goes wrong. And the bride walks down the aisle with her father and mother, goes off stage, and there's this beautiful violin solo. Yeah. And my friends afterwards were like, yeah, we thought that was it. Like, we didn't realise what more there could be to the story. And it's in the minutes following. It's the minutes following the wedding where sort of it hits the fan, so to speak.
As it were. Quite very, very nicely done, by the way.
But it's bizarre that the whole show's about the wedding, and yet you don't see it.
Or ostensibly about the wedding. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really about the relationships, isn't it? And
it's a people play with music added into it.
It's good character stuff as well, because it is actually, as you say, we said earlier, everything rings true. But good comedy arises from character, and it does in this piece. All the characters are properly delineated. Once again, that's helped by a fantastic cast. Everything about it is crisp and very clear. As an audience, I had no real trouble understanding what was going on in terms of a narrative drive. I'd say I didn't understand all the bits and pieces in terms of references, but I knew I wasn't alone in that. But actually, understanding was at the forefront of what was delivered, and I think that's very much a credit to you. It's clear, it's crisp, it's nicely done, and it's executed splendidly, if I might say.
Yeah, very kind to say that. I think as a cast, we sort of pushed them to sell the show as we know everything that we're talking about,
Yeah.
even if we don't.
Yeah.
And
Look the part.
yeah,
Fake sincerity.
exactly. Refer to this panini station like you've had a million paninis in your life. Refer to him speaking Yiddish as if you know that that's awful. And I do hope, and it seems that just carries off to the audience, and they sort of get it by association, even if they don't actually know what's happening. They can understand, oh, that's funny because Jenny's a sensible character and she thinks that's silly, so we think that's silly.
We're taking our cues from the character.
Exactly.
Well, bearing in mind that I genuinely, and so did my friend Mike, think it was an American cast, I think we bought into the idea they probably did know what they were talking about, even if they've never been there, it turns out. So what for you then, as director, would you say, what was the challenge you think was the hardest one for you to surmount?
I think probably one of the biggest challenges we faced as a company, to sort of limit this to myself would be unfair to the actors as well, but as you'll know,
Good
having
collaborative
seen...
work, by the way, well done you.
Thank you. Having seen the space, we are pretty much in the round, because it's very thrust staging, but then there's also these little seats that sort of curve round at the back almost.
Yeah, there's one or two seats that actually sit next to the orchestra as
Yeah.
well. You know, it's many, because you've done so well and have sold out. Let's get this on the record. You have sold out, which is a remarkable
Entire
thing in
run,
Edinburgh, particularly for a musical, I must say.
Yeah.
If you're not a stand-up comic, it's a great deal harder to do. So I think that's a real credit to you, and that must be word of mouth, and because people don't know the show, so it can only be that everyone's saying how good it is, as indeed I have been saying. It's it's in the round. You're quite right, and you've got as many seats in as possible, quite rightly. But they're all selling out. But
yeah, so it's a musical that lends itself well to being in the round because it is sort of a realism take on it. There's no outrageously large dance numbers. I mean, there's a couple of dance numbers, but there's still sort of...
It's mostly movement, isn't it, rather than dance per se. Yes, right. I don't think anyone would call it a dance show.
No. And our choreographer, Nell Springrose, she's done a great job of sort of adapting what isn't necessarily a dance number into something a little bit more fruity for the audience.
Yes.
She's done shows
Is that the official term? Fruity? Yeah. I like that.
When we were sort of looking at choreographers, Nell had done things like Rent before.
Oh, right,
so
okay,
that's sort of the perfect... it's very different thematically.
I think it is.
Yes. But Rent in itself isn't a dance show.
No.
So to have experienced choreographing that is probably quite a good fit.
Sondheim is fun enough, very similar. You don't go to a Sondheim with the dancing.
Exactly.
There may be movement and dance in it, but
exactly.
Personally, I prefer that. I'm not that drawn to dance. I like appropriate movement.
Yeah.
And I don't dislike dance, but I don't go.
Yeah, I'd agree
you
with
won't
you
find
there.
me at Cats or anything like that.
So yeah, sort of taking the musical and putting it into the round is something I've personally never done. I've directed a few shows before, but they've all been proscenium.
Yeah. Which is standard, really.
Yeah. And sort of, I think anyway, a lot of musicals are written with the assumption that every future production will be proscenium, with the exception of things, coming out of Circle in the Square, like the likes of Fun Home. They're very much written to be in the round. But
they've been structured appropriately.
Exactly. Whereas, your Phantom of the Opera, you wouldn't catch me trying to stage that in the round for any sum of money in the world, because it's just not written to be like that.
No, I agree with that.
Whereas, purely because of the realism of the story, it feels natural for the audience to sort of feel like they're just flies on the wall, just looking in and seeing...
Exactly as you are at a wedding, actually. I mean,
exactly.
You go to a wedding reception and you'll be either sitting around a table around the edge watching other people do stuff, maybe chatting, or you might be on the dance floor or whatever it is, but it's a space that you're sharing, but sometimes in an oddly delineated way. So actually, I think an in-the-round directorial choice for this, I appreciate it was thrust upon you, but thrust not being the right word as we're talking stage designs, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Actually works really well. Funny enough, it adds, I could simply imagine I was just sitting around a little circular table with some people I don't know very well, watching what's happening in the middle of a wedding, which is a wedding.
Yeah. But I think sort of the biggest challenge, to bring it back to your question, was there's a few scenes towards the end when everyone's on stage, all 13, and this actually got picked up in a review that came out last night, that because it's just like a lot of revelation, let's say, and a lot of characters discussing things with other characters. There's not much could have been done in way of movement.
Yeah.
So once the actors were on, they were there for 10 minutes. And unfortunately, this reviewer sat in one of the seats.
Slightly restricted viewers.
One of the worst seats in the house, to be fair.
Which is where most reviewers end up, I must say, speaking as one.
Yeah. So, his review was sort of peppered with, I couldn't see bits and bobs, which is totally fair. And like I say, it was one of the biggest challenges because during this big revelation scene, it'd be outrageous to suddenly have the characters all decide to switch position.
Yeah, you don't move.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe something we were all sort of battling against, and something that we've maybe not got quite right. But I think, like I say, having 13 people on a stage that's not actually terribly big and surrounded by audience, we've done not bad for that to be the one complaint.
Funnily enough, I would have slightly... I understand exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, my analysis wasn't so much about the direction, it was more about the structure of the piece, funny enough, because this was the other structural strangeness of the piece, which is that, the two-thirds Act 1, if you like, which results in the twist, is moving, by which I mean physically fast-moving and actually a little bit farcical in the kind of, day-to-day farcicalness. But then you had the big... let's compare it to a farce. Forgive me, I'm sure you know the difference between French farce and British farce, but French farce gets to the end of Act 1 where the House of Cards topples over, and then Act 2 is about rebuilding a status quo to take us back to either where we started from or a new status quo. Mm-hmm. So it repairs the damage. A British farce takes you to the end of Act 1 and the House of Cards falls over, and then Act 2 is about desperately trying to rebuild the House of Cards, and it's still going wrong and getting much worse. So it's actually about total chaos and destruction, as it were. That's a shorthand for the two different... But this is a French farce, if you want, in that sense. It builds up to its massive surprise at the end of Act 1, and then Act 2, which is comparatively shorter, I call it about a third, but that's just off the top of my head, is about finding some semblance of order and everything settling down into a new way of living afterwards, which is a happy ever after. If we're going to quote out Into the Woods, we might as well. But in a strange sense, that is what it is. But Act 2, therefore, has a very different dynamic. Yeah. So Act 1 and Act 2 do not necessarily... I mean, obviously, plot-wise and characters, it's all a big cohesive whole, but with a W. But in terms of that second act, it suddenly feels very different. It is about resolution, restitution, repair, redemption in some cases, and rebuilding. Lots of R's there, you see. I'm talking through my R's. Not for the first time, I'm sad to say. But and that therefore feels very, very, very different. It seems almost that there's also fewer songs in it. I don't know if that's actually true.
I think,
but it seems like there's a lot of exposition. Now, that's not your fault, that's not the cast's fault, that's not actually anyone's fault, because it's a completely understandable thing, and when you get to the end of it, everything is right. But Act 2 does feel structurally different and more talky, and I don't think there's much you can do with that.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of the inverse to what we're used to. Sort of normally in a musical that I've worked on anyway, you've got a big opening number and then a big opening scene when the characters are all laid out, and then you probably have a sort of I Want song, and then another bigger scene where more characters are introduced. Whereas with this, our characters are all introduced in this big opening number, but it's so whirlwind that we then spend most of the Act 1, so to speak,
getting to know them.
Exactly. So then when the twist happens, that's when you have the big scenes. That's when the relationships come into play between all these relationships that have built up between the two mothers, between the two dads, between the bride and the best man, for example, and all these little things, they come to light in a new way. So of course that's when there's more dialogue to be had.
Of course, you have to explain it.
Because it is a very light show in terms of dialogue.
Oh yeah.
And the first act's pretty much sung through, with the exception of dialogue to change the scene to set up another song.
Yeah. The Wedding Planner gets quite a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
He's a more talky character, isn't he, really?
Exactly. And the dialogue that is there is all humour in the first half.
And it is. Let us never forget, this is a comedy all the way from first to last. But that second act again also has another slightly odd situation, which is that Jenny, the central character, whether she's in the forefront or not, is ironically not really the mover and shaker dynamically of that second act. It's actually other characters having their circumstances rearranged and rewritten. And she is the recipient of the outcomes that creates, rather than being the instigator. Mm-hmm. Now, we are used to our central characters being dynamic or even inadvertently causing things to happen. She doesn't. Well, I suppose at one level she makes a telephone call which sets a whole series of things off. That's right in the middle of Act 1.
Yeah.
But actually the twist is not really about her. The resolution to the twist is not really about her. The outcome of the twist is.
Yeah. And I think...
and isn't that odd? I mean, just structurally, that's so curious. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, I'm not criticising it, but it is very much a different track to what you'd expect. And
it's strange because Jenny very much drives the first half. Throughout the opening number, throughout X, Y, and Z, it's Jenny coming on and interacting with characters and blah, blah, blah. And then, with the exception of the finale Ultimo, which brings it back to Jenny...
Her torch song, her 11th hour number, as it were. Not torch song,
there's like 10 minutes after she does her big Jenny's Blues number. From then till the finale, I think she has like 5 lines, which is unheard of, given that she normally has 20 lines for every one another character has. And it's nice. I feel like it's maybe written that way because it is such a powerhouse role that they maybe... when they were workshopping and things, felt like, oh, we should maybe give her a break and just let her stand on stage and emote.
Well, I suppose let's talk Sondheim and Into the Woods then. You know, once the witch goes off and has the last 20 minutes of a show in the groom room having a cup of tea before she comes back on for the walk down. And the baker's wife, you know. Actually, that's really odd because they are by far the 2 most significant female characters. There's also Cinderella in that. But, you know,
they're top 2, definitely.
And they're not in it to the end in Act 2. And indeed they disappear relatively early on, enough for them to go off and have a sandwich. Or whatever it is show business people do. Bernadette Peters having a pizza. I have no idea. We have digressed, but you're right, Jenny is... It's an unusual role for that central character to have. But that all comes down to the writing. I say no criticism, but... an unusual path to take, and therefore an extra difficulty for you. It's interesting that reviewer was picking up on that in his or her way, but I don't think that's a directorial problem. Well, I think it's a problem for a director, but I don't think it's a problem caused by a director. So.
Yeah, I think when you actually look at it critically, I don't think there's anything we could have done. With the exception of maybe buying a revolving stage and having the whole thing constantly I think
we're talking a very different kind of show then, aren't we? As well?
It's one of those scenes where people come on, people discuss things. It'd be all the worse for having them move position for the sake of it. So
absolutely. And
I'll take that on the chin and
well, I think you can ameliorate that with structural issues. Actually, whatever you do, don't buy a revolver. I can't imagine that would enhance the experience. That would just seem stupid, wouldn't it? Everyone would go, why have we turned into Les Mis? What the hell's happening? It is, however, a great show and a great production. So briefly then, who are you as a group?
Room 29 Theatre was founded by myself and our co-founder James Leggett, who was our sort of producer extraordinaire for It Shoulda Been You and helping us get this up and running. So the name actually comes from the flat and I that James shared 2 years ago now, 2015, 2016. We lived together sort of academic years up at university in Dundee.
And what did you read?
I am currently studying interaction design at the art school, and James did politics and international relations.
Oh right, so not necessarily musical theatre based.
So following that,
international relations will be markedly improved with a few more jazz hands, in my opinion. And Lord knows we need them now.
So he's now down in London working for AKA Marketing.
Oh right, okay.
So marketing West End shows, the museums, X, Y, and Z. And I've got 1 more year left. And we met doing the university's musical theatre society.
A well-trodden path.
Yeah. And it was, oddly enough, it was probably about a year ago to the week that we came to see some shows in the Fringe. James was performing, I'd done it before. And we were sitting looking at shows and we were like, we could do that better.
Yes.
Like, not to blow our own horns prematurely, but
Oh, well, no, you have. This is an absolutely top-notch show, so you can say that your ambition has been met.
I'm very glad. It would have been catastrophic if not. But yeah, we were just looking, and we were getting frustrated because we wanted to do it so badly. And
no,
this
you wanted to do it so well. I see what you're saying. Yes.
So this was the summer after we'd lived together, so James was getting ready to move to London. But for that whole year before, so coming up for 2 years now, we'd been looking at options, we'd been looking at shows, we'd been budgeting, looking at venues and what they cost.
It's been quite a long-term plan in its way.
Yeah, and it was... we'd sort of thought about starting fundraising, but then we didn't want to announce a show 2 years in advance, but then you couldn't really fundraise for a show that you've not announced. Yeah. So eventually it was just after New Year, January of 2017, and the rights came out for It Shoulda Been You, and we just said, you know what, we need to commit to it. So we put down the deposit on the show, we applied for the rights.
Don't we do it?
Yeah,
we'll do it. Yeah.
Exactly, and then that gave us the push to then fundraise and to do our Indiegogo, and we did Kaylee's and concerts down in London, we did a concert up in Dundee.
That's a bit different from just your average crowdfunding, isn't it?
Yeah, we did do crowdfunding.
But it was part of
a greater...
A portfolio of fundraising options.
Exactly. And it's paid off, we broke even on opening night, which is unheard of for the Fringe.
And you've been selling out, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, so...
Does this production have a future? That's the obvious question. Is it likely to go anywhere else, or does it finish and everyone go home?
I'm not sure. The current plan is that we finish tomorrow, and that's it. We're sort of thinking about future Edinburgh Fringes, certainly, and we're looking at other options. And I must admit, sorry James for saying this hasn't been discussed with James, but I wouldn't be adverse to bringing it back if the need for it was there. That's the wrong phrase. I feel like the need for the show
and your own will. Yes. Yeah. Well, can I tell you, I said this to you on the night. That show, your production, is a bit of all right. It is a good show. I would see it again. Well, I tried to see it again, and you sold out. So can I just a small incremental weight on the balance of please do it again from me.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see more of it.
Yeah.
And it's such a good show, and it's such a good production. We're making the difference of the two.
I think as well, I've been saying this all throughout the rehearsal process, because I'm used to, I've directed shows at university, and with us, we start rehearsals in September, the show's in March, and we do 4 shows. Yeah. So it's a 9-month rehearsal process for 4 shows.
For a week, yeah.
Whereas with this, it's been much shorter rehearsal process, down to 3 weeks, for a much bigger run of 8 shows. So
and with walk-up audiences.
Exactly.
So even a kind of in-house audience, which you do get at university.
Yeah. So it's been surreal, and because of the material, because of the cast, because of the experience, it's going to be a hard show to let go of. Especially, this is more the material than us, but we know it's an important story that we're telling, and that there's not many musicals that are telling this story.
It's not just a throwaway.
Exactly.
You can take it that way if you want it, but actually it has... This is actually the worst possible way of describing it. The show has heft and bottom.
Yeah, it does.
But that is, I mean that positively, it's without ramming it in your face. It's actually very gently letting you know that the barriers are there and can be taken down.
Yep, exactly. So I feel like the discussion may be had to bring it back, but I feel like it would be unlikely. I feel like we're sort of too much of a good thing and all that. This has been such a pure Fringe experience with sellouts and with glowing reviews, and
you could risk that if you did it again.
Exactly.
Only time will tell for you.
Yeah.
You may wake up in the middle of October going, nah, let's do it again. And then, well, how about you then? How can people contact you about your directing skills or anything else they might want to chat with you about?
So you can find me on Twitter, NeilLavin94.
Do you mind spelling that? Because there are various variations of Neil.
So it's
only one with a K, of course.
It's NeilLavin 94. And that's probably the best way to get in touch.
Start on Twitter and take it from there. Perfect. So people can contact you if they would like to do so.
Yeah, of course.
That's wonderful. Well, Neil, it's been lovely talking to you, but I've got to ask you then, we've just mentioned waking up in the middle of October. When you do wake up in the middle of October, and it's perfectly possible after having a big show in Edinburgh, you may sleep till then. What will be the thing that you take away from this show to remember it by, or what have you learned? What's the thing that it should have been you will stay with you?
Sort of, to excuse the cheese, I do think we've
Very kind of you to offer it.
We've really lucked out on the company that we've assembled. There's 13 cast, 4 production team, 7 in the band, I think.
It looked even bigger than that to me.
Yeah. And we've got stage management people off stage, and everyone, we just get on so well. The cast especially, obviously that's my sort of primary focus.
The ensemble.
Yeah. And we've had some social nights. We went to the launch party. We've had drinks at people's flats, and it's just such a great group of people who get on so well. And I've never been in a show where 100% of people have got on 100% of the time.
Not just a show. I mean,
life,
any slice of life in any direction you want to cut it. I thought that's a pretty rare option. I can see that.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think it all again comes down to the show, because it is such an honest piece with such an important message, and the people who are going to get involved in such a show are going to be a specific type of people with specific views, with specific morals, and yet it's just been so many laughs, and I think we're all really going to struggle going back to, so-and-so works as a GP.
Sunday's going to be a sad day, isn't it?
Oh yeah, a hungover and sad day.
Oh well, yes, well, sad for different reasons then, yes. Maybe a sad half day if you're all hungover.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Well, Neil, I have to say it's been a privilege to talk to you.
No,
it's been
I'm
a delight
honoured
to talk to you about such a successful production of such an interesting and clever show. So I do hope, even if you don't choose to do this one again, that you will stay involved in the arts, because if this is what you're producing, then it's pretty good stuff. It is, as I said earlier, a bit of all right.
Yeah, it's been great chatting to you, and you're very kind to compliment us so highly, so thank you very much for coming to see the show, and all the best.
I would do it again like a shot. Musical talk. And there we are. That was Neil Lavin, the director of It Shoulda Been You, which I saw in Scotland at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe last summer. And what a good show it was. And I hope it becomes rather better known in this country and elsewhere, because it does deserve to be. Well, that's it for this week. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode talking about It Shoulda Been You. Join me again next week when I'll be talking about a new cabaret musical entitled I Have a Bad Feeling About This, which is all about social anxiety. But don't fret if you miss it. Well, it must now be time to sign off. And looking at my sundial, it seems that time has stopped, although that is because I keep it indoors. So, that being the case, let's say farewell. I'll say it first. Here's me doing so. Farewell, goodbye, auf Wiedersehen. There, all in the wrong order. Bye! This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2018. To find out more about the world of musical talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Musical Talk Thos. Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. I am now recording. Do you mind just giving me a quick level, a conversation, a conversational voice that you're happy talking at?
So my name is Neil Lavin. I'm at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Do you mind coming in just a little? Is that okay? Yeah, try that.
So my name's Neil Lavin. I'm at the Edinburgh Fringe. Talking about Shoulda Been You. Cool.
As I say, there's a little gauge here, so I'm afraid I won't always be making eye contact.
Cool.
You will get a magnificent view of the top of my head. And the way I normally like to start, I don't know why, I need to tidy. The way I normally like to start is to ask people to give me their name, their involvement in the show, and then the name of the show, because you'd be surprised the number of people who forget that tiny, tiny little factet. And then we'll take it from there. I mean, it'll just be what it is. Is that all right?
Yeah.
In your own time.
Great.